Some of the most important lessons you learn in school, well, they're not actually on any syllabus. I'm talking about the unwritten rules, right? The social cues, all the things you're just supposed to know. This is what's called the hidden curriculum, and for some people, it can feel like running into an invisible wall. Just listen to this. This is from Saif, a student from Palestine. That feeling he describes of being an outsider, of constantly being reminded that you don't really belong, that's exactly what we're talking about today. It's this powerful, really isolating feeling, and it's often fueled by those social cues that nobody ever spells out. Okay, so this whole system of unwritten rules, what do we actually call it? Well, there's a name for it, and it's really the key to unlocking what's going on here. It's called the hidden curriculum, and that's a great way to put it, right? Think of it like a school's cultural software. It's constantly running in the background, teaching students how to act, what the institution actually values, and, who fits in and who doesn't. And it does all this without a single formal lesson. It's basically the difference between the official rulebook and the real rules of the game. But here's the thing. This hidden curriculum, it's not always neutral. Sometimes it can become actively harmful. And to figure out how and why, researchers came up with this really powerful framework they call the toxic triangle of diversity. And yeah, this is where things get pretty serious. See, when a few specific societal conditions all come together, the hidden curriculum stops just being about, feeling a little left out. It becomes genuinely damaging. It creates what this paper calls a toxic context for diversity. So what are these three sides of the triangle? Well, first up, you've got deregulation. This just means there's a lack of solid laws to protect students from biased content. Second, there's voluntarism. This is when institutions are just kind of expected to do the right thing on diversity and inclusion, but there's no real accountability. And the third piece of the puzzle? An absence of supportive discourses. Basically, it's not really okay to talk openly about these issues, which silences anyone trying to make a change. You put all those together, and yeah, you've got a perfect storm. Okay, so to see how this toxic triangle actually plays out in the real world, the researchers focused on international students in Turkey. And it's a really fascinating case study, especially when you consider its complex history and its big recent push to become a global hub for education. I mean, just look at the history here. The Turkish education system has gone through these massive changes. It went from a multi-faith Ottoman system to a strictly secular republic, and now it's this mix of market-driven policies and a kind of renewed neo-Ottoman cultural vision. And you can bet that every single one of those shifts added a new complicated layer to the hidden curriculum. And here it is. This number really gets to the heart of the issue: 350%. That's the increase in international students in Turkey in just the 5 years before this study was done. I mean, wow. So the country was clearly doing a great job attracting students from all over the world. But the big question is, was its educational system, and more importantly, its hidden curriculum, actually ready for them? So let's hear from the students themselves, right? Because this is where all that theory about the toxic triangle really hits the pavement of daily life. Okay, so the first big finding from the research is this. The hidden curriculum is really tangled up with this broader neo-Ottoman vision for the country, this idea of rebuilding historical connections with places that were once part of the empire. And you can see why that's such a powerful draw. You hear it from students like Falah from Yemen. He says this shared history makes him feel a connection to Turkey. It feels familiar. But there's a catch. Because as Amare, a student from South Africa, points out, the curriculum just assumes everybody has this deep local knowledge. The history classes, for example, just dive right into the details of Turkish history without providing any context for the international students. The hidden message here is basically, yeah, you're welcome, but you're expected to already know our story. It's an immediate barrier. All right, the second big finding is all about how the hidden curriculum reinforces this one very specific idea of what's normal. It creates this kind of dominant standard for what you should look like, how you should act, and where you should come from. And Ida's experience is just, wow, it's so telling. She talks about feeling like an outsider not only because of her ethnicity, but also because she's a woman. This is a perfect example of what we call intersectionality. The hidden curriculum isn't just hitting her on one front, it's creating these overlapping layers of exclusion. It's not just one thing, it's multiple things at once.
And finally, the research found that these unwritten rules act as a kind of silent aggressor. Now, that doesn't mean it's an open attack. It's something much more subtle, but it's a source of real emotional harm that comes from feeling isolated and just constantly being misunderstood.
You can really hear this in the voice of Salwo, a student from Somalia. She describes this deep sense of loneliness. Because her courses are mostly individual, she barely gets a chance to connect with her local classmates. So she's left to figure everything out on her own, turning to Facebook groups for the kind of support the university just isn't providing. And the result? She feels completely alone.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? And maybe more importantly, how do we start to challenge the silence of this hidden curriculum?
So let's just recap really quickly. In this context, the hidden curriculum became toxic in three key ways. First, it used history as a lure to attract students, but then excluded them with a hyper-local curriculum. Second, it reinforced this single dominant idea of who belongs. And third, it acted as a silent aggressor, leading to real loneliness and isolation.
Okay, so recognizing the problem is obviously the first big step, but the good news is the research also points towards some real solutions. So the question becomes, how can schools and universities actually start to tear down these invisible walls? Well, the path forward seems to involve a few really key actions. First, adopting a truly global and inclusive teaching style, not one that's centered on just one culture. Also, offering actual courses to help international students get familiar with the local culture. And this is a big one, hiring more international professors and staff. Finally, making sure the international office is a real, robust support system, not just a place for paperwork. And that really brings us to our final thought. Because this idea of a hidden curriculum, it's not just something that happens in universities, right? It's everywhere. It's in our workplaces, in our social groups, in our communities. So it's worth asking yourself, what are the unwritten rules in your environment? And maybe the most important question of all, who do those rules really serve? And who do they leave on the outside, feeling like a foreigner?